Welcome to the Vermis Mysterious. The podcast from Yoggoth. Today, I will be your keeper of arcane lore. And I'm joined again by Carl.
Greetings and salutations.
Today's game will be set in the 14th century. And what we're going to do, one thing I like to do sometimes when I'm setting up a game is just start with a casual conversation and do some world building with the players. We're going to be setting this story in a small town. Do you want to name the town for us, Carl?
Jasperton, I think.
Jasperton.
Yes. And I am a Father Superior at the local monastery in Jasperton Abbey. I'm the Father Confessor. So when people come to the Abbey to confess their sins, we form the function of the local parish here in Jasperton. So the monastery is the local church. And so people will make their way up to the monastery for church on Sundays and to confess their sins whenever they please. And I hear all their confessions, so I know everybody's dark secrets.
Can you tell me a bit about the building itself, the monastery?
Well, okay. It's very old. So the main church building was Anglo-Saxon, but actually before that Druidic. Very ancient building, but as is customary in England, a lot of the churches were, former pagan places of worship and shrines that were just sort of appropriated and reused. It became a pagan Anglo-Saxon shrine when they came over, and since then has been converted into a church. But the building itself is completely ageless, and if you dig down deep into the crypts, there are all sorts of strange layers of sediment and different inscriptions and runes on the bones down there. Some of them even have teeth marks, gnaw marks, but we don't talk about that. Anything interred more recently is perfectly civil. And we do have a small reliquary, so we've got some pieces of the True Cross, some of the Virgin Mary's milk, and we've got why don't we have the femur bone of St. Patrick?
Perfect. I'm going to give you a little trainee monk or, someone to help you out.
Bodley. Yes, Bodley. He is an idiot, really. He's the fifth son of a, really bit of a nobody farmer. Farmer didn't want to subdivide his land too many times, so after the fourth son, he decided he needed to start sending his kids to the monastery. So Bodley's here. He doesn't know a word of Latin, but he's memorized some of the prayers, doesn't know what they mean, and he can say the Mass very quickly. Mixes up the words, of course, so when he says Hoc est corpus meum at the moment of consecration, it comes out like hocus pocus, but that's okay. It's all magic.
And what about the richest, the wealthiest man in town?
Duke Finlay. Yeah, Duke Finlay is an Irishman. He made his fortune rustling sheep, moved his way up from a small-time bandit to a big-time baron. He fought for the king, putting down some, Scottish uprisings in the north, and was granted lands.
What about his residence? Surely the largest in the town?
No. Well, the abbey's much grander and older. But that's monastic land, and the church sort of reigns over this little town. It's this big, imposing monastery on a hill looking down over this fairly shabby city that's popped up around it. The sort of I suppose it's like an old pre-Tudor house, fairly modern in my time, but for us looking back, archaic jettying architecture, jutting out the second level over the streets. Mostly timber and sort of weatherboard looking construction with some stone foundations at the first level, but only just enough to keep the damp off the wood. Nothing particularly sophisticated, all thrown up in a hurry.
Duke Finlay often walked through the town on warm summer days such as these, observing the peasants sometimes flicking them a coin or two.
Sometimes just
But
flicking them.
today, he is on all fours, nude, raving and ranting, making sounds like an animal. You think about the man he used to be as you sit in the abbey, stare out the window. It is a small blessing that you cannot hear his wretched groans. Bodley emerges. He stares out the window, watching, following your gaze for a moment. Father, what's gotten into him?
I think you've got it backwards, boy. What's gotten out of him? At least now the outsides matches insides. Black hearts deserve mad tongues. I say let him rave.
The man down below in the town screams and raves, and you watch on until another man, a simpler man, a peasant, walks towards him and crushes Duke Finley's head in with a rock.
I stand up aghast and look out. Now, he might well have been mad and raving, but he was the damn lord of the town. I'll go have a word with this peasant. I say, Bodley,
Yes, sir.
carry the axe.
Very well.
Now, Bodley's stupid, but he is strong. Sort of hunchbacked, and he's got one eye much bigger than the other. Sort of bulging, if you can imagine him, as he looks up from his crooked neck. We're both wearing the same clothing. I'm the Father Superior, but I don't dress any differently than an ordinary monk. And we're both just wearing this big, sort of brown overcoat.
It's a boiling hot day.
Oh, yes, but all I have on is this brown overcoat. It's all I own.
You walk out of the monastery and into the fresh air. Although it doesn't feel so fresh. There is a corrupted smell in the air. It's been hanging there for weeks now. So you walk down the steps of the monastery. The not uncommon sight of bodies lying on the steps of those who have come to seek out your blessing, but have passed away just yards from your door.
I step over them. Fear not, Bodley. Whatever inflicts them is unable to harm us. We are consecrated. The body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. You and I are the church in this place. Come. As I look over all of the sort of rotting remains of peasants and things, I think of what horrible sins they must have committed to be punished.
You make your way down to the town. It doesn't take too long. And there you see, dancing hysterically around the bleeding and thoroughly dead body of Duke Finley, is a circle of revelers. About 6 or 7, let's say 7. Dancing, screaming, half singing a terrible tune. They're laughing. Their lunacy is disturbing, but they seem joyous.
I take one look at the revelers, and I mutter under my breath, Santa Maria und Spiritus Sancti, Invicti. And then I shout out at the crowd in my most authoritative voice, You there! Revelers! Stop your madness and answer to me. By the authority of the Pope, of the Holy Catholic Church, and of God Himself, I demand an answer.
They continue their reveling. It grows louder, reaches a crescendo of maddened screams, laughs, and cries. As you emerge, they don't seem to register that you're standing there, frowning at them.
Bodley,
Yes, master.
these peasants have been overcome by the devil.
Clearly.
Quick, pass me the axe. And I walk over to the tavern at the fringe of the clearing. Is there a large barrel of pitch or tar in any reasonable proximity? It's a common thing to have.
I'll give it to you.
I strike the barrel of pitch with my axe, split it open and spill it into the street, kick the barrel down and roll it toward the clearing. And I grab a torch from the wall and hold it menacingly over the trail of flammable liquid.
One of the revelers, a young girl, seems to notice what you've done. She stops jumping up and down for a moment, stares over at you, and then screams. The others turn and look towards you, and then the ringleader, a disheveled, debased-looking man, wearing just rags, basically, and a small string around his neck with some sort of amulet. Looks pagan in origin to you. Sees you, and then he screeches to the others. Keep going! Keep dancing! Keep screaming! They turn back and keep rotating around the body, screaming in revelry.
I shout out to them, and lo! The angel blew its trumpet, and fire did rain down from heaven upon the earth. The people below did scream, and I dropped my torch onto the line of tar. And as it lights up a line, I sort of take the opportunity of uplight and, fire beneath me to sort of impose myself more dramatically. I don't think that pitch is explosive. I don't think I'm going to blow up anything. But, just to get a big fire roaring around them and frighten them away. Maybe burn a few of them a little bit. And I heft the axe overhead. When St. Boniface claimed this land from whatever pagan devilry you're insisting upon now, he struck down their gods with this axe. By God, if you don't stop this revelry, I'll strike you down where you stand. Tell me, what is the meaning of this?
A few of the revelers run away, but the scraggly ringleader treads towards you. One of his eyes seems to have rolled into the back of his head. He seems to be bleeding from the mouth, almost as if he's bitten into his own tongue.
I mutter it bodily out of the back of my, mouth, just trying to be quiet. Bodley, run to the abbey. Now, fetch the crossbow.
Holy man. What is this devilry which has cursed our town?
You tell me. I have been at prayer for 3 days and 3 nights, cloistered in the abbey, and I look out my window to see this.
Poison in the well.
'Tis not what goes into a man, but what comes out of him that makes him unclean. If there is poison in this place, it comes from the people, from their own black hearts. I know their sins.
Yes. A certain breed of people, shouldn't you think? A few of them moved in just last year. You know of whom I am referring.
I do not.
The Jews.
No, this smells much fouler.
It must have been them.
I saw a pagan sign upon one of those men. Despicable though they are, the Jews are no pagans.
But they are cursed to hell. Surely they would commit such crimes against us good Christian folk?
Perhaps were we good Christian folk, I should feel differently. But I think the peasants of this town have fallen to something blacker and darker than the admittedly superstitious reveries of Abraham. No, this looks like something worse. And I walk over to the man crushed in the middle of the clearing, the lord of the town, whose head I think is probably still crushed under the big stone.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of order to the blood? Is it laid out in a certain way? Is there any kind of ritualistic arrangement of the scene?
Not to your eye, at least not immediately. As you inspect the body, you notice he's covered in hundreds of small black dots.
I roll the barrel of pitch over onto the body, dribble it around, and light him on fire.
He goes up in flames as you mutter a prayer under your breath. And then you see Bodley.
I finish muttering my prayer. Per ministerium ecclesiae, indulgentium tibi trubat et pacem, et egote absolvo appacetis tuis in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. And Bodley says, Amen! and hands me the crossbow, which I shoulder. And I pass him back the axe. Bodley, did you know any of these men that we saw dancing in his clearing just now?
Yeah, I've seen them around, but couldn't tell you their names, no.
My lord, Bodley, why did God give you such a big, repulsive eye if you couldn't use it to spot out sinners? Where have you seen them around?
They're peasant folk, Father. I have seen them.
They're all peasant folk, Bodley. This is a peasant town.
Yes, Father.
Afraid of your wrath, he flinches a little.
I've seen them in alleys. I've seen them through the tavern windows.
You mean to say you don't know the names of any of these men?
Well, no, I don't, Father.
I turn to that other man that was in the clearing with us, who's now crouched down on a corner biting his toenails, big hooked yellow toenails. Tell me, do you know the names of any of these men in the clearing?
He looks at you very suspiciously. I mean, you can tell, you can read him like a book. He's just a common peasant. You can tell that he was a bit miffed that you didn't agree with his Jew poisoning the well hypothesis. And now...
It was a plausible argument.
Now he's become a bit suspicious of you.
I look down at him and say, listen to me, man. I have the power either to condemn or pardon you. I, alone in this town, have authority to absolve sins, and I could testify against you at the side of God should you not help me. Those who stand against the church will attract the greatest ire on the day of perdition. Look at the flames behind me, see them flicker in my eye, and tell me you do not fear God. Now tell me, do you know these men?
He looks terrified.
Yes, sir. Well, it was Tom. We were following Tom.
We? You counted yourself among them?
Well, yes, I suppose so. Please don't.
And what's your name?
Jean.
Good job, Jean. You've begun penance. You can say the Hail Marys later and the Our Fathers, but for now, I'm going to ask you, or perhaps give you a special opportunity, to pay for some of those sins of yours. Lead me to this Tom. Tell me where he is. And what say we call it even?
Yes, Father. I'll take you.
He stands up and begins walking down the street, always keeping an eye on you as he goes, darting his head left and right, looking down the alleys.
I follow him at a short distance, but before I do, I just dip the heads of the bolts in the tar from the barrel, just so that I can light them at a moment's notice if I need. And I grab a torch. It's a bit dark in this town always, especially through the winter. There's very high hills around it, so the sun sets at about 4 p.m. And just sort of sits in twilight.
Carry through the streets until you begin to hear a sound. A sound you've been dreading for months now. It is a distant, loud screaming. The sound of 100 voices in agony. Screaming in prayer. You know immediately that they have come. You can see over a distant hill a crowd of around 100 people. Men, you see first, with women trailing at the rear. You see their whips, and you see
Flagellants.
the color red, staining their garments, staining the earth beneath them. The sound is accompanied by a smell as well. Many of them, as they amble or march closer, are covered in the telling sores of that black darkness. What do you do?
They bring the sickness with them. We must bar the gate of the town.
They look like they'll be arriving at their current pace in about 20 minutes.
Tom will have to wait. You there? And I look around to the men I've press ganged.
Yes, sir.
Go with Bodley to the men at the guard. Tell them they must bar the gates and stand ready with crossbows pointed at the door, waiting, letting nobody in, unless I say so. I'm taking command of this town.
Of course. He runs off. Bodley stands there for a moment.
Master, what do I do?
Make sure that man doesn't run off. Get him to do his job. Go on. Threaten him with the axe if you have to. Use the big imposing voice like I taught you.
Okay. Man!
Oh, Bodley. Say something in Latin if you have to. It always sounds scarier. I run into the town square and I ring the bell. And I shout, Lo! Lo! To me! Men of Jasperton, to me! And I'm ringing the bell as loud as I can.
Village folk gather in the town center. There are not too many of them. The vast majority of people in the town are already dead. They come, men, women, children, all excited. In fact, it's a flurry of excitement. They seem ecstatic.
The flagellants. They're coming. They're coming. They can save us.
I step up onto my pedestal, ready to disappoint them all. People of Jasperton, the men approaching our city are not friends. They are not come to sanctify us, but to defile this hallowed soil by their blood. They make a mockery of our Catholic faith and treat with demons as though they were angels. The path to sanctity, to purification, is not through bloodletting, not through the mortification of our own flesh, but the flesh of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We must resist these men at any cost. They will cause havoc in this place. They outnumber us, and if they come into our town, they will strike dead those they deem sinners, those they deem wicked, cause all manner of harm, and worst of all, bring the Black Death and sickness with them. We must resist them.
Don't listen to him. These people have come to save us. Don't you remember the stories? The flagellation of Christ. We have sinned.
Do I recognize this man from the gathering before?
Yes, you do.
I scream out, "Deceiver!" and I level my crossbow at him and fire it at his heart with a flame tip. I want to set him ablaze and make a sort of visible sign. It's all about theatrics, being a monk.
You do, sir. It's quite effective.
See the purifying fire of God, and how the one who speaks against his anointed burns.
Do not trust that man. He's a deceiver.
Silence, witch! People of Jasperton, you have killed your lord this day. I have the power to call authority down upon you, to pardon you, or to strike you dead by the will of God. And so help me I will, if you do not resist this band of bandits gathered at our gates.
There is a long moment where the ringleader struggles, falls to the ground, and dies, and the crowd falls silent.
Hold your hand over the flame. Feel it. Such is the fate of those who speak against the church.
In the silence, as people sort of shift around and try to get a glimpse of the burning body, you can hear in the distance, as the wind changes direction, it carries with it the sound of 100 whips, 100 cries, men and women from across the country gathered in this party of faithful flagellants.
Do these men and women screaming outside, wailing like sinners in hell, sound like the saved to you? Do they sound like saints or like souls mourning in hell? Unless you wish to join them, shore up the gates, shore up the walls, pour pitch at the perimeter, take up arms, but by God, act!